So for this one, I will be doing number 1 through 7. So number 1 is 2 cosine cubed times cubed x minus cosine x equals 0. So for this one, I should take out the cosine x first, making 2 cosine squared x minus 1 equals 0. So in this equation, you can get cosine x equals 0, or cosine squared x equals 1/2, which can equal root 2 over 2. So if cosine x can equal 0 or root 2 over 2, the unit circle, if I remember correctly, cosine 0 is pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Getting the 0, 1, and 0, negative 1. And root 2 over 2 is in the first quadrant and the fourth quadrant. So that is 7 pi over 4. And pi over 4. That'll be number 1. Number 2 is 2 cosine x plus tangent x equals secant x. So in this case, I changed everything to sine and cosine, since tangent is sine over cosine, and I multiply cosine x to it because everything else has a cosine in it. So I put cosine x in the front and put 2 cosine x over 1 plus sine x over cosine x equals 1 over cosine x. And then I have to put the parentheses right here, putting cosine x here. And when I do that, I end up with 2 cosine squared x plus, let me just clear this, plus sine x equals 1. So in this one, cosine squared x can be 1 minus sine squared x. So when I multiply the 2 to them, it'll be 2 minus 2 sine squared x plus sine x equals 1. In this case, I will flip everything to one side, making 2 sine squared x minus sine x minus 1 equals 0. So I have to factor this out. When I do, I end up with 2 sine x plus 1 and sine x minus 1. That means sine x can be 1 or negative 1/2. Sine x is pi over 2, and negative 1/2 is in the third quadrant and the fourth quadrant, getting 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. So number 3 is just sine x equals tangent x. So this question is the same thing as sine x over 1 equals sine x over cosine x. And since these two both have a common sign, when you divide sine x by sine x and sine x over cosine x by 1 over sine x, like I did to the other side, it cancels out right here, and I end up with cosine x over 1. 1 over cosine x equals 1. And that's secant x equals 1. So secant x equals 1. When it equals 1, there is only one of them, which is 0 degrees. So x equals 0. Number 4, cosine x minus cotangent squared x equals cosine x. So as you can see, so you can put cosine x over 1 minus cosine squared x over sine squared x equals cosine x over 1. And because this is there, I can divide 1 over cosine x on both sides. Which I will probably get crossing these out. Cross this out with this, and this squared will be gone. I will end up with 1 minus I will probably end up with, excuse me there, I kind of messed up. But this is a multiplying, I read it wrong. So when the cosine x, I would have to divide cosine x on both sides, which I will get cotangent squared x equals 1. So cotangent squared x equals 1 and cotangent x is the same thing because root 1 is 1. So cotangent x equals 1. When it is 1, there are two things, which are pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4. So those two would be it for number 4. Just move it over here more. Number 5, sine x plus 2 cosine squared x equals 1. For this question, I have to make sine x and cosine squared x the same. So I put sine x plus 2 minus 2 sine squared x equals 1. So when I flip it to the other side, it will end up like the other one, which I'll get 2 sine squared x minus sine x minus 1 equals 0. 0. For this one, it's the same thing as number 2. Because the equations are the same, I will factor it out, getting 2 sine x plus 1 and sine x minus 1. So sine x can equal 1 or negative 1, which means x is pi over 2, 7 pi over 6, and 11 pi over 6.